Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Rose Fletcher. I am an autism champion, and I'm also a lead speech and language therapist based primarily at Foresters Primary School, but also at Carew Academy and Oaks Park High School. So today's training is going to look at specifically embedding communication skills into the classroom as part of your quality first teaching approach. So I am going to start sharing my presentation now. So if you could just bear with me so I can. Okay. Julie, would you mind giving me the thumbs up if you can see that slide? Okay, perfect, thank you. So, like I just said, this is about supporting language and social communication through quality first teaching in schools. So the agenda for today is to look at what is quality first teaching, autism and language difficulties, listening and auditory processing, receptive language, expressive language, social communication, vocabulary development, levels of questioning, support ideas, inclusivity, and additional support strategies. So first of all, not wanting to teach any of you how to suck eggs, but I just thought it'd be worth revisiting what is quality first teaching. So according to the quality first teaching site on the government website, quality first teaching is a style of teaching that puts emphasis on high quality teaching, which is inclusive of all pupils' needs. It is an instructional approach which supports differentiated learning strategies to support SEND pupils' learning in class, ongoing formative assessment, and many others. Quality first teaching ensures that each student must receive teaching according to the student's preferred learning styles. For instance, if a student finds it difficult to grasp a concept through visualization, the teacher must use alternative ways such as verbal and auditory teaching to explain the same concept. The most effective teaching staff personalise their style of teaching to suit their students' needs. All great, I'm sure, as you know, in theory, but in practice that can be a little bit more challenging. What I thought we'd do as well is have a look at this waves of intervention model, which looks at quality first teaching. The reason I'm sort of looking at this now is because I wanted to compare it later on to the current therapy model that we're working towards, which is very, very similar. And as I'm sure you're all familiar with by now, the universal aspects are the key to the building blocks to all language, all learning, and should be seen in all of the classroom. And then the targeted supports look at those supports that are required for more specific inputs that might be well delivered as a whole class, but they can also be delivered individually, and specialist tends to be more individualized. This is very similar to the therapy model that we run through Cognos. So just a little time for you all to think, what strategies do you currently use to support communication in the classroom? So I wonder if you wouldn't mind putting a few things in the chat just to get the conversation going. I'll give you a minute or two to have a think about that. Yeah, a lot of visuals now and next, visual timetables, core boards, visuals, reduced language. Okay, gestures, absolutely. Visual timetables now and next, core boards. Okay, signing, yeah, absolutely. Physical resources. Okay, so lots of different things that you're all doing already. We are going to explore some more of these ideas as we go along this presentation. So a little question for you. Again, if you can use the chat to respond, what percentage of the population is autistic? Just putting it out there. 1, 2, 10, 30. Okay, quite high percentages there. The actual percentage is currently running at 1.7% of the entire population, but obviously this is a changing picture where people's awareness increase, and also where the diagnostic processes have improved. So this is ever changing and actually ever increasing picture, but at the current time it is 1.7%. Okay, so autism and language difficulties. So autistic children may have difficulty developing language skills and understanding what others say to them. We call this receptive language. They may also often have difficulty communicating non-verbally, such as through hand gestures, eye contact and facial expressions. This we call expressive language. Language abilities vary between individuals. However, the vast majority have some level of impairment. This may manifest as difficulty with communicating using speech or language, understanding meaning and rhythm of words and sentences, understanding of body language and the meanings of different vocal tones, following another's interest but a broad vocabulary in areas of their own specific interests, and social interaction. It may be some of the above or a combination of many. Obviously it is very dependent on the individual, but I just thought it'd be worth looking at that. So what percentage of autistic young people do you think have language difficulties? 10%, 20%, 50% or 80%? Again, if you wouldn't mind putting your responses in the chat. Yeah, a few different ideas there. Actually, 80% of all autistic students have some level of language or communication difficulty. As we've already mentioned, this varies from child to child, but definitely is very, very high. It may only be social communication, but communication nevertheless. So just to remind ourselves here what language difficulties impact upon. Play, social, emotional, thinking, problem solving, behaviour, learning, reading and writing. Really, the list is never ending because all of those specified areas have different branches and different things they impact upon. So really in primary schools, we're looking to support the language as much as we possibly can really in the early stages of development, just to really ensure that all of these areas have minimally impacted upon moving forward into later years. When we look at speech and language development, the baseline for all language and communication development comes very, very early on, and it's all about attention and listening. Increasingly, research shows that language continues to develop throughout school, but this bottom stone, if you like, is the baseline for all of it. So that's why we put so much attention and listening when we're in the classrooms. Play and interaction is also key to that social development and social interaction that we put, again, so much emphasis on, and really helps those students that struggle, particularly in later years when we know that interactions become harder and harder, and this can lead to all sorts of further problems emotionally, psychologically and so forth. Receptive language comes next, expressive language follows that, and then very finally speech sounds, which is the icing on the cake, which is why when we work with autistic students we don't very often put emphasis on the speech sounds, because as you can see from these building blocks, there's a lot that needs to come before that. They also need a certain level of self-awareness in order to work on those as well. So with that in mind, how long do you think your child can listen and focus for? Again, maybe a few responses on the chat would be great. So we're thinking in a classroom setting, when they're sitting listening to you, how many minutes do you think they can actually maintain their attention? Yeah, neurotypical plus their Asian minutes. A few people have said that. If I just show you what we have here, a typical pattern of listening is for the first 5 minutes, they will listen and focus for about the first 5 minutes. And then gradually over time, this decreases quite significantly. So as you can see, by 30 minutes, they're really, really struggling to listen and pay attention at all. Varies from classroom to classroom, but there's some research to show that teachers sometimes can talk for 30 to 40 minutes without taking a break at all. Obviously, this isn't conducive to good learning, so it's really worth thinking about how long we are talking and ways of breaking up that talking period within sessions. So have a little think. What strategies can you think of to break up speaking times within the class? And obviously keep in mind, these are typical attention patterns and would be even less for some of our autistic students and students with language and learning difficulties. So any strategies that you currently use in the classroom that breaks up learning? Yeah, absolutely. Brain and movement breaks. Talking partners, yeah. Active walking breaks, yeah. Yeah. Handing out resources. I think it doesn't really matter what it is in a way, as long as you are giving that child a chance just to sort of relax and slow down. This just represents, again, like the model to remind us all of the attention and listening. So yeah, a few suggestions: get the children to talk about with each other whatever the lesson is, learning breaks, videos and quizzes, and just kind of constant reference to time can be really useful ways of kind of breaking up that talking pattern. So not only do some of our students have difficulties with attention and listening, but in the same vein, really, many ASD students have difficulties with their auditory processing. So this is the ability to listen to and process the information that is being provided verbally. So thinking about how long they can remember information, again, this is a typical pattern of development. So it would be even lower for some of our SEN pupils. Usually they can remember new information for about the first 10 minutes when it's first delivered. And again, a very decreasing pattern if this information isn't repeated and kind of visualised and modelled and generalised into the classroom. So by 6 months, really we're saying they have very little recollection of any new learning at all. When you consider, as I said, that this is a typical pattern, probably you can halve that for some of our learners, possibly even more than that. And I really think it kind of is a really good reminder that actually how important repetition and visualization is, because so often, you know, in the classrooms you hear people say, oh, you know, I told them that, I explained this to them. And then you break it down, you say, well, okay, how long ago did you explain it to them? How did you reinforce that learning? How many times did you repeat it? How many times did you revisit it? Did you mind map it, etc.? And usually the answer is no. So strategies to support that would be reducing long sentences, omitting unnecessary grammar, e.g. the and just using keywords. Check they are looking and listening, and when you're providing the information, and really just always making sure it's visualized and you have opportunities to repeat and reflect on any new learning, and ideally repeat it as much as possible. Okay, so what percentage of an average class would you say has language difficulties? What would your guesses be here? Put them in the chat. Yeah, quite a few different thoughts there. On average, a classroom has 10% of their students with long-term language and communication difficulties, but in some more deprived areas, research has more recently shown it can be up to 75%, which is really, really frightening. And obviously this is not only kind of frightening in terms of the numbers in school, but when you think of the impact it has on later life, it is even more disturbing, because obviously those people with identified needs, and indeed non-identified needs in some cases, can often go on to have much more significant difficulties later in life, which we'll talk about in a bit. So thinking about receptive language now, this is primarily, as I'm sure you all know, difficulty understanding what people are saying and difficulty understanding words and connecting these with ideas. This can manifest as people tuning out when people talk, because obviously they're going to do that if they don't understand what you're saying. Difficulty following directions, trouble answering questions, interrupting people who are speaking, usually because they're trying to find a way of probably diverting attention, asking people to repeat what they say, giving answers that are off and not very specific to what you've asked them, misunderstanding what's said, not understanding jokes and idioms, and with our more severely affected learners, echolalia, which is when they repeat back exactly what you might have asked them. This is a really clear indication that they haven't understood what you've said at all. Okay, then we have expressive language. Ways of kind of identifying pupils with expressive language difficulties would be those students that have a difficulty providing a response that makes sense, probably using insufficient vocabulary, so aren't able to find the right words, grammatical errors that you would expect them to be intact by their working age, word finding difficulties. When they can't find the right words, they use things like circumlocution to speak around words. The ability to be able to self-monitor their speech so as to hold on to an ongoing conversation, and those that frequently copy responses of their peers because they're probably unable to find the right answers. So they're the alerting signs that they have expressive language difficulties. So what percentage of autistic students would you say have learning difficulties? So again, if you wouldn't mind putting some thoughts into the chat, please. Yeah, it is 1 in 3 learners. I think most of you got that right. So yeah, 1 in 3 or 30% of autistic individuals have some level of learning difficulty. And I just thought it's quite useful to remind ourselves of the trends here. So of all our children across the UK with a statement or EHCP, if you look at the percentages here of the areas of need, speech, language and communication stands out as by far the highest at 22.5, closely followed by autism at 17.6%. And when you think how many hundreds of thousands of EHCPs there are across the country, that is quite a significant number of children. So let's just think about social communication for a minute. So, as I'm sure you all know, people with social communication difficulties have difficulty with their social interactions, social understanding, pragmatics, and language processing. So to support social development, we suggest that you do provide opportunities to work and play with others. Providing role models, I think, within those groups is really, really crucial. I think quite often, just for practical reasons more than anything else, we tend to group in schools students with high levels of needs together. But actually, more and more research shows that actually if you include positive role models in those groups, it can be really, really helpful and really supportive of that group of students. Provide forums to discuss specific areas of social development. So what we mean by this is those students, which I'm sure you've all come across, that will come in from the playground absolutely destroyed because they've done something wrong or upset somebody, and they just don't understand what it is they've done, and they can't quite fathom what on earth they could have done to have caused either someone else's upset or to be in so much trouble. And sometimes they just need that opportunity to sit down in a safe space, ask these questions and discuss these areas that they're finding so difficult. Practice these skills that they're struggling with. I know they say, again, increasingly research is saying that you can't teach social skills. That's probably true because you can never predict a specific situation. But that said, I think there is still a lot of benefit to working with these students to support and nurture them really with the basic skills that they need to maintain friendships, to communicate with others in a way that is conducive to sort of strong working and, you know, social relationships. And also asking those older students, the year 5s and year 6s, what would you like to work on, rather than just telling them, you know, I think you need to work on this. By actually asking that question is really, really helpful to them quite a lot of the time, and nearly always in my experience, they will come back and say something. When you're working and producing social stories with students to help them understand their social development, always write the story with them. Don't just present them with the story. This isn't really helpful. When you're writing a story with students and giving them leading questions, they've come up with the answers themselves in theory, and it's a much more powerful way of working with those individuals. And I've just added here, don't judge. You know, some of our students, you know, you might have told them 100 times the same thing, but actually, you know, they're just not retaining it, because to them, any one situation is different from the next. And even though to us as, you know, neurotypical adults, we might think, actually, you know, you must understand this by now. Quite often they don't, because even the smallest differences between two situations can make a big difference in their mind. Don't expect immediate change, because actually, as I've already mentioned, you know, we often need to repeat these skills, revisit them, you know, and support them to generalize these skills. And don't set the child up to fail when you're working with individuals socially. You know, try and set up groups or I don't know, lessons that is going to support them to kind of engage and be part of that group in a way that, you know, they're able, because they want to walk away from any of these situations feeling positive. So I thought we would look at vocabulary now. Many of our autistic students struggle to learn new vocabulary, and indeed those with other learning and language difficulties also. So the process of learning is thinking about, well, they never heard the word before. Often our students said, I've heard the word, but I don't know what it means. I know what the word means, but I can't explain it. And then finally, after, you know, a huge amount of repetition, they will perhaps say, I know what word means and now I can explain it, and that's a really positive feeling for them. But actually, you know, when they get to high school age, so particularly with our year 5s and 6s, when we're preparing them for that new kind of setting where they get less opportunities to learn new words and less sort of one-to-one time and less nurturing time in general, actually on average they're learning 7 to 9 new words a day. So to provide them with strategies to retain this vocabulary, to know how to support themselves to learn, and, you know, encouraging that independence is really important. But obviously a lot of our students also, particularly the more severely affected and those with not only autism but with language disorders as well, often are very late to develop language and therefore have huge gaps in their vocabulary. So even some of the more, what we would call high frequency words, are more difficult for them to come by. So don't ever assume they understand words or keywords in questions, particularly if they're indicating to you that they're not able to respond in a way. And sometimes you do need to break it down. Do you understand that word I'm saying? And actually it's really, really surprising with all students, both primary and secondary, how often they will say, no, I can't explain that to you, because they just haven't understood it in a way that's conducive to A, being able to explain it, or B, to learning. So it's really, really important we give them opportunities to both pre-learn, but also once you, even with that pre-teaching, that you allow them opportunities to, you know, repeat, mind map. There's loads of different strategies we can look at here. So you could use the how well do I know the word visual, gain keyword list from your teachers. This is for people, you know, that perhaps want to take things home and learn them at home. Loads of parents are always saying, oh, you know, if we can help with anything, you know, we'd love to be able to help. So just, you know, encouraging a few keywords to be written into a homeschool book or anything can be really, really useful. Word maps, as I've already mentioned, supporting them to put the words into meaningful sentences, and using games to learn and recall new keywords are all really, really helpful. So now we're going to think about questions. There's a lot to cover in terms of language, so this is just you know, a really flying tour, but it's just worth mentioning all of these different aspects, I think, you know, in terms of what we can do to support and embed in the classroom. So when we're working with questions as speech therapists, we consider the blank levels of questioning, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. So level 1 supports the, you know, is about the immediate environment. You know, what are you doing? Where is it? So something that is relating to the here and now. So a lot of our students, you know, do manage those in context. Level 2, grouping objects and understanding functions. Again, sort of understanding their categories, which also supports word finding and understanding functions. A lot of our students struggle there, but in particular they struggle with levels 3 and 4, which requires at level 3 for the student to make basic predictions and begin to use higher order thinking skills, and at level 4 to involve problem solving, predictions, solutions and explanations. And obviously as they go through the years of schooling, these, with, you know, questions within these subsections can become increasingly challenging for our students. So to support this, just ensure that you're understanding as far as possible the level of questions the child is able to understand. Ensure the child has heard and understood the question or questions. Only ask them what they are able to respond to, particularly if you're in a group situation. Encourage them to repeat these aloud. Again, incorporate regular learning breaks when they're learning how to respond to these things. You know, get them to get things from another room, get some water. Write instructions down or questions down. Use task lists, which could include some of these questions. Write a help box on the whiteboard that gives them steps to a task, but also might include some of the questions that you're asking. and encourage the pupil to seek repetitions or specific clarifications. Warn them if they're going to be asked a question. Again, particularly if a group situation, you know, if there's suddenly, particularly those students that find it harder to process information, you know, I've seen it so often where they just asked a question as part of a group and they're like a rabbit caught in headlights, and actually that can put them off ever wanting to put their hand up or ever wanting to respond because they're worried they're going to look silly in front of their peers. And I've just sort of highlighted here that communication should always be a positive experience. So consequential behaviours, as I'm sure you're aware, a really high proportion of those students that we see with behavioural problems have some level of language difficulty, and this is quite often due to the fact that they're having difficulty sequencing information, they can't explain themselves because they have a limited vocabulary, or they have difficulties in understanding and using abstract language, so possibly haven't understood, you know, a lot of what's being said in the classroom. And this can manifest as being aggressive, naughty or uncooperative, acting like the class clown, unmotivated with poor attention, perhaps defiant or strange, withdrawn or in their own world. So it's really worth considering if you have a student in your classroom that is behaving in a certain way, whether this is down to their level of understanding within the class. So true or false, 60 to 80% of 7 to 14-year-olds with serious behaviour problems have a language impairment. If you wouldn't mind putting your responses onto the chat. Yeah, 100% true. Yeah, it's really quite a staggering figure, and actually when you consider, I think it's as high as 80% of prisoners in UK prisons at the moment also have some level of language impairment as well. So it's really important that we are addressing this as much as possible. So now going on to therapy model, as I mentioned right at the beginning, I showed you the model of quality first teaching, and as you can see, the therapy model looks very, very similar to this. I'm sure you're probably all familiar with this now, if you've been liaising with your speech therapists or occupational therapists in school. But the universal support that we offer includes resources available for everyone to use, and that can be accessed by education-based staff or parents. And then the targeted support we offer is for those experiencing difficulties needing their needs met through partnership working. And the specialist area, which is the really small tip of the iceberg, is those with complex needs that require specialist approaches. So we're both kind of working on very, very similar models is the message here. And if we can collaborate to support that area of universal support, then it will be much easier for us as therapists to be able to offer more support in this area if we're not putting all our time and energies into these two areas up here. Because actually, as I'm sure you all know, the more they get on a day-to-day basis with ongoing input from both schools and from the home environment, the more likely they are to succeed. So universal support, what does it look like in terms of therapy? Well, I've touched on it a little bit across the way, but therapy-informed outcomes might be part of that if they have an EHCP. Therapy strategies embedded into the curriculum in terms of OT, motor, emotional regulation skills and programs run by school staff. Sensory-informed classrooms and strategies used to support regulation. I'm mentioning OT as well because obviously they're part of the therapy offer quite often with our students. Visual support across the setting to support understanding and communication. supporting the simplification of language when needed, and supporting teachers to allow time for students to process information and formulate responses, and allowing structured and predictable routines to be embedded as part of the whole school approach. So what are the barriers in school to communicating and that sort of effective kind of teacher-child approach in the classroom? Well, quite often it is those children with speech, language and communication needs that are not able to access the learning in the way that they should be able to. That can be with autism, with DLD, or with a range of learning difficulties, including those of hearing impairments. Some of these may be diagnosed, some of them may not. Emotional, these are just the key points. There are many, many more, but emotional barriers and taboos, and this is more pertinent potentially to those sort of older children's, to things that teachers perhaps aren't very specific about. It could be relating to, I don't know, sex education or religious things that people don't feel comfortable about talking about, and so there becomes a big area of misunderstanding here. A lack of interest in a topic and distractions in the classroom, people walking in and out, too much kind of information on walls, people, and quite often it's staff themselves that are talking while the teacher's trying to deliver a session, and this can be, particularly to our learners that are already struggling, even more detrimental to their learning. Physical barriers to non-verbal communication. So by that, what I mean is perhaps if they're at the back of the class and they're not getting those additional cues, they're not able to see what's on the whiteboard clearly enough, they're not able to see any additional kind of, I don't know, gestures that teachers are doing. And something that happens so often is the use of jargon in the classroom. So ambiguous language that our learners are just not going to be able to access or process. So these are just a few of the ideas, but as I'm sure you can imagine, there are many, many more, but it's just worth thinking about some of those areas and how many of those happen in our classrooms on a day-to-day basis. So what percentage of students with SLN difficulties go on to face mental health challenges in adulthood? Who would like to hazard a guess there? Put into chat, please. Yeah, it is really high. It is without the right support, and if you consider the 10% that I mentioned earlier of those that have ongoing long-term language and communication needs, of that 10%, it is actually as high as 80% in some areas, but more specifically 50 to 60% in others that go on to face mental health challenges. So it's a really, really stark figure there. So thinking more about what we can do to support our children and young people, reduce your language. This will always make it easier for the child to understand. Use visuals to support the language, and always use the child's name first so they know you are speaking to them. It will give them time to process the information, and always allow time both for them to process the information and indeed to respond. When dealing with behaviour issues, always use a calm, steady voice, and repeat any information you need to as required. Support them with predictability where possible. Many of our autistic students, I'm sure you're aware, this is their biggest area of need, and it doesn't go away as they get older. They just often mask it a little bit better in school, but then you hear parents, particularly once children start secondary school, about them falling apart at home because actually they haven't got a clue what they're supposed to be doing, and actually that's really anxiety inducing. So just simple organisation tools like calendars and diaries, creating consistent but flexible routines, the use of visual schedules, and keeping in mind most autistic students are visual learners, and use these. Don't just have them up in your classroom. I mean, so often I hear teachers say to me, oh yeah, but we've got the visual schedule, look. And it's there, it's on the wall, but not in the whole day is it ever referred to. So if you're going to have a visual schedule, just make sure you're, referring to it consistently. Break down tasks, use checklists, bag tag checklists, just to make sure they've got what they need. Provide extra processing time in order to make sure that, they're following everything they need to. And potentially, if there's a special event or a change in routine, social scripts or stories might be useful, as we've already mentioned. Simple school to home visuals like this can be really, really useful. Quite often, because our students aren't able to communicate clearly to their parents about what they need, a lot of things get lost in translation. So just having a simple kind of home to school book. And here's just some examples of some general visuals that we use in the classroom. So a regulation, how are they feeling visual? Reminding them how to structure a sentence by using colourful semantics. Now, next board, photographs of favourite things, and using symbols for our more needy students to make requests and so on, are all really useful. The reason I'm mentioning home is because, as I'm sure you know, so many of our students following a weekend or an extended period off, like a holiday, come in completely dysregulated because, they've not prepared for school, they've forgotten what it's like to get ready for school. So just providing some of our parents with these sort of routine schedules can be really useful to support our children that struggle with these transitions, particularly, like I say, after a period of absence back into schools. And having those can really make a difference to how regulated they are and ready for learning they are when they come in. So managing the environment, consider the time of day and what is expected. Is it an alerting or calming environment that they need? Are you calm? Because sometimes our students and individuals, if you're constantly shouting and stressed, because you're trying to calm down the whole class, actually this can be really dysregulating to some of our students that can't cope with the noise levels. Having a to-do list where they look, e.g. on the desk or wall, this is really important as well for supporting their ability to kind of become more independent, because they don't want to have to ask for everything. And so if they've just got a list on the wall they know they can refer to, this can be really useful in embedding that sort of independence. For transitions, give fair warning and prepare for change. Reduce visual clutter. I think I've mentioned this earlier. Assign a play space or a chill space with as minimal visual clutter as possible, and keep things in the same place so that the environment is more predictable. And as we've already mentioned, offer movement breaks. So to build independence and confidence, give the child a role or responsibility. Actually, even simple things can make the child feel more important, and give them the role or responsibility to work with their strengths. So if they're organised, maybe they might be the ones that collect all the, registers, or, they might be the ones to give out the pencils or something like that, but give them a responsibility that they can be successful at. Provide clear boundaries and targets, but this should be applicable to all the class and not just our children with SEN. Particularly in mainstream schools, I think quite often you hear parents say that, their children feel singled out because they're the ones that are being provided with the boundaries, but actually they're relevant to everyone in the class. Reward and praise appropriate behaviour, and be specific about this. It's always the behaviour that we're concerned with and not the child. and tell the child what to do rather than what not to do. So give them positive things to work towards rather than negative. So in conclusion, it's really important that we work together. We are working collaboratively towards a better future for our pupils to ensure they succeed, have confidence and better access to the school curriculum and the community. Our aim is to continually provide an outstanding service to your school and pupils whom we work with, and we can't do this without you. It's really, really important that as many of these strategies as possible are embedded. So that's kind of it for the presentation, but it'd be really useful for me to know if you could just maybe put one thing finally in the chat just to say what you might do differently following this presentation, which can be shared with the group. I'll give you just a minute to do that. Slow and reduced speech. Yeah. Training on reduced language. Thinking carefully about the vocabulary that you're using. Ensuring visuals are being used and referred to. Using colourful semantics. Using the child's name first when addressing them. Reducing language in potentially stressful situations. Individualised social stories. Try and remember to give children more time to respond. Shorter and clear instructions. Okay, amazing. Okay. Make the environment clear and have visuals. Okay, that's great. Okay, so I've just put a few resource links. This presentation will be shared with you through Rebecca. But Cognos have recently updated their website, and there are a huge array of resources there available for anyone to log into and find out about. The National Autistic Society is also another great place to go for resources, which I'm sure you know. Rebecca Duffus, if you haven't already got it, I've included a link here for local clubs, activities and resources, and this is updated on a monthly basis, so it's really great for some of our students that are perhaps finding difficulty socialising outside of school. So there's loads of ideas of outside of school activities they can attend. The NHS website here, there's some therapy sources that I found which have free resources, and places like Twinkle that you're probably aware of as well. And another site that I found with quality first teaching ideas that I thought would be really useful. So does anyone have any questions? If you do, please feel free to put them on the chat. Okay, well, I'll take that as a no then. Thank you so much for your time today. And if you think of anything, please do feel free to email me or Rebecca, and I'm absolutely sure we can come back with some answers for you. Okay, so I'm going to end the meeting there. Thank you for your time. Oh, hang on, there might be some questions. Oh no, just thanks. Okay, you're welcome. Thanks very much indeed, and I will end the meeting there. Okay, bye then.